Just before we get started with today's episode, I do want to say that it's sponsored by NordVPN, the ultimate solution for online security and freedom. Did you know that holidaymakers often end up paying higher prices for their travel, flights, accommodation, car rentals, and more? But fret not, with NordVPN you can save big on your travel expenses. It's just one click away. NordVPN is a powerful and secure VPN service that can save you money on your online bookings. With Nord, you can virtually change your location to access exclusive deals and discounts available in other countries. Not only will you save money on your holidays, but you'll also enjoy the peace of mind that comes with NordVPN's top-notch security and support. With Nord, your online journey is shielded with rock-solid encryption, making it impossible for snoopers to pry on your data. And did I mention threat protection? It guards you against malware, trackers, and pesky ads, so you can browse safely without interruptions. With the mesh network, you can securely connect to your devices from anywhere. Even your smartphone can be your secret vault. And they've also got a dark web monitor. It's like a spidey sense that alerts you if your credentials are at risk. And here's a bonus: dedicated IP, bypass captures, and block lists like a pro. So what are you waiting for? Get an exclusive offer from NordVPN by visiting nordvpn.com/TIFO, and you'll get a 2-year plan plus 4 months for free. And it's risk-free thanks to NordVPN's money-back guarantee. So check them out below. There is a link in the description. And now today's video. On the grounds of a private estate just outside of Paris, two gentlemen faced each other a few paces apart, swords drawn and at the ready. One man had insulted the other's honor, and the only way to gain satisfaction was through a duel to first blood. The referee dropped his hand, and the two duelists lunged at each other, their razor-sharp épées glinting in the morning sun. While it may seem like a relic of the distant past, this scene actually played out in 1967, the same year as the Six-Day War, the first heart transplant, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is the absurd story of the last sword duel in French history. The combatants in this dispute with a 57-year-old Gaston Defferre, mayor of Marseille and later Socialist Party candidate for president, and 45-year-old René Ribière, the Gaullist parliamentary deputy for the Val-d'Oise department. On April the 21st, 1967, during a particularly heated session of the French National Assembly, Defferre interrupted a speech by Ribière, shouting, "Shut up, you asshole." Later in the assembly lobby, Ribière demanded that Defferre apologize, and when he refused, Ribière challenged him to a duel. Strangely, this was not the first time Defferre had been challenged or accepted. 20 years earlier, he had fought a pistol duel against newspaper editor Paul Bastide, albeit with non-lethal wax bullets. Being a more experienced swordsman than Ribière, Defferre suggested that they face off with blunted épées. Ribière, however, was not satisfied and demanded sharpened swords and a duel to first blood. He also set the time of the duel for the next morning, for he was to be married the following day. On hearing this, Defferre vowed to wound Ribière in such a way as to spoil his wedding night very considerably. The duel took place on a private estate in Neuilly-sur-Seine, just west of Paris, and was refereed by Jean de Lipkowski, France's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. While the duel was intended to be fought in private, news of the affair soon spread, and dozens of reporters and cameramen descended upon the estate to capture the strangely archaic ritual. At Lipkowski's signal, the two duelists cautiously advanced towards each other, épées pointed to strike. But, to the disappointment of the assembled journalists, the duel was a brief affair, with the more experienced Defferre quickly scoring a hit on Ribière's arm. But Ribière demanded a rematch, and the two men resumed their positions, only for Defferre to quickly wound Ribière a second time. At this, Lipkowski put an end to the duel and declared both men's honor satisfied. While history does not record whether Ribière's wounds unduly affected his wedding night, both men went on to live long and full lives. Despite losing his bid for presidency in 1969, Gaston Defferre later became a cabinet minister under President François Mitterrand, holding several portfolios, including Minister of State for the Interior from 1981 to 1984. He died of natural causes on May 7, 1986, at the age of 75. René Ribière continued to serve as deputy for Val-d'Oise until 1978 and died on December 15, 1998, at the age of 76. But if you think this comically anachronistic duel was a mere historical aberration, well then you don't know the French. Officially, dueling had been illegal in France since the 17th century, when Kings Louis XIII and XIV issued royal edicts outlawing the practice. Yet the tradition still persisted, especially among military officers, and between 1685 and 1716, an estimated 10,000 duels were fought in France, resulting in some 400 deaths. Non-lethal sword duels were also popular in other countries, especially in Germany, where the practice evolved into the bloody sport of academic fencing, or mensure. And for more on that, please do check out our previous video on the curious case of the extreme sport mensure. And while the practice gradually declined throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, it continued well into the 20th, with nearly a dozen duels being recorded in France prior to Defferre and Ribière's climactic 1967 showdown. For example, at the turn of the century, on February 5, 1897, we have a rather momentous and slightly humorous duel that resulted from gay literary critic Jean Laurent accusing famed French author Marcel Proust, by who all accounts was also gay, of having a homosexual relationship with the son of one M. Alphonse Daudet, Lucien Daudet. Proust demanded satisfaction for the accusation that he had a tryst with Daudet and challenged Laurent to a duel. So yes, this was two gay men dueling over the suggestion that one of them was gay. Proust threw down the gauntlet, and the famously asthmatic author showed a coolness and firmness for 3 days prior to the duel which seemed incompatible with his nerves. His friend Reynaldo Hahn recorded in his journal that the respect of his peers was invaluable to Proust, and the attack on his character made it easy for him to stand his ground. The author certainly took a certain measure of pride in his behavior. When his character was called into question any time after the duel, he would point out his actions at the time. He wrote in 1904, "I remember when I fought with M. Lorraine, a time when I had not yet set the day, but I was already there in my morning coat, ready. My only concern was that the duel did not take place before noon." In any event, the official arrangements for the duel were made, with it being agreed it would be held at the traditional dueling spot of Paris, the Forest of Meudon, on February the 5th, 1897. The weapons in this one would be pistols shot at a distance of 25 paces. The day of the duel was cold and rainy. The two well-heeled dandies took their positions, faced one another, and drew their pistols. Proust took his shot first. The bullet hit the ground next to Lorraine's foot. Lorraine then took aim and fired. His bullet went wide of the mark, but 2 bullets had been exchanged, and witnesses agreed that with this meeting, Proust's honor was restored. Proust and Lorraine would continue to hate each other, but this particular issue and the duel that followed, which was reported on in the newspapers, had been publicly laid to rest once and for all. For the history of literature, it turned out to be a very good thing that Lorraine was such a lousy aim, as Proust would go on to write what is considered one of the greatest novels of all time. And in the bonus facts in a bit, we'll get to another famed French author who fought in a duel in which his pants fell down, but nonetheless he survived and went on to write another one of the greatest works of fiction of all time. But going back to 20th century French duels, many of these duels were politically motivated. In 1911, for example, René Picard insulted Joseph Ramenet during a political discussion. Consequently, Ramenet sent 2 of his friends, André Gaucher and Robert Guillot, to seek redress. The challenge was issued and a duel scheduled for 10 a.m. on the 22nd of March beneath the Grand Rue Ferris wheel in Paris. The duel ended when Ramenet parry riposted one of Picard's attacks and struck him in the wrist. The following year, Paul de Cassagnac, editor of the Bonapartist newspaper L'Autorité, published an article attacking Charles Marat of the royalist newspaper La Action Française. The latter challenged the former to a duel, and on February the 26th, accompanied by their seconds, the 2 men faced off at Neuilly-du-Seine, west of Paris. A contemporary newspaper account described what happened next. The 2 principals are first-rate fencers. As soon as the traditional "Allez, messieurs" was uttered, Marat attacked the opponents with remarkable energy. De Cassagnac, who had the advantage of height, replied with equal vigor. The fight was extremely exciting for the onlookers while it lasted. It seemed at one moment as if Marat had received a thrust in the neck, but fortunately only his beard was touched, and this did not prevent him from continuing his offensive tactics, which he did with unabated ardor. But then it was his adversary's turn to attack. Marat, however, not to be daunted, dealt a vigorous thrust with his arm extended, but a moment later his sword fell from his grasp. De Cassagnac had disabled him, this time with a terrible forward movement which could not be checked, and if Marat's arm had not protected, he would have been wounded very badly in the chest. His arm was seriously injured, and this brought the combat to a close. In 1913, Jules Zertel, Procureur General for the French Caribbean colony of Martinique, published an article critical of Deputy Joseph Langrosilier, the island's parliamentary representative. Langrosilier challenged Lientel to a duel, and while the latter had initially agreed, a court of honor ruled that, given his advanced age of 61, he was unfit to take the field. However, Lientel's son, Jules Jr., offered to take his father's place, and on the 5th of February, the 2 duelists met on the field of honor. The fight ended quickly as the younger Lientel recklessly lunged at Langrosilier, who immediately wounded him in the arm. And finally, in 1949, lawyers Pierre Nordman and Jean-Louis Tixier-Vinencourt fought a duel when the latter accused the former of collaborating with the Nazis during the Second World War. The affair ended with Tixier-Vinencourt drawing first blood. Other duels, however, were triggered by considerably pettier disputes, usually of the artistic variety. In November 1910, for example, Jean Manod fought a duel against literary critic Georges Casseya. The nature of the dispute is unknown, but the duel ended with Manod being wounded in the arm, causing referee Roussier Dorsier declared him unfit to continue, and the affair settled. On March 13, 1944, Jacques Richepont fought a duel against Pierre Frondier over comments made about Richepont's mother, Madame Lapalsier, an actress in Frondier's play Aphrodite. Madame Lapalsier took offense to these comments, and a heated argument soon broke out between her husband, Jean Richepin, and Frondier. Naturally, a challenge was issued and a duel organized by the now standard dueling grounds of Neuilly. Over 100 celebrities, family members, and reporters were in attendance as Fronde and the younger Richepont squared off in the field of honor, the fight ending with Richepont drawing first blood. On May 26, 1938, dramatist Henri Bernstein fought and won a duel against Edouard Bourdet, administrator of the Comédie Française, over a minor artistic dispute, while finally in 1958, France's penultimate duel was fought between 73-year-old ballet choreographer Serge Lefar and 54-year-old producer Georges de Cuvasse. During an argument over Cuvasse's staging of Lefar's ballet Suite en Blanc, Cuvasse slapped Lefar in the face and refused to apologize. Lefar thus challenged Cuvasse to a duel, which was held in Blaru, Normandy on March 30, 1958. Watched by dozens of newspaper reporters, the two men fought for around 7 minutes until Cuvasse lightly scratched Lefar's arm. The affair settled, the two men set down their weapons and embraced. So underwhelming was the spectacle of the two old men facing off that the New York Times reported, "It may well have been the most delicate encounter in the history of French dueling." While such extreme reactions to petty disputes may seem archaic and a bit silly by modern standards, there is something refreshingly noble about the idea of people being willing to endure severe injury and pain in defense of their honor and principles. One can only wonder, were this custom brought back, would the world, and especially the internet, maybe become a more civil and reasonable place. Bonus fact. Speaking of momentous French duels, on the 5th of January 1825, on a bitter cold day, a young Alexandre Dumas, soon-to-be famed playwright and novelist, and the current son of Thomas Alexandre, who was once one of Napoleon's generals, fought in his first duel. During the duel, Dumas successfully defeated his opponent and avoided death, but according to his memoirs, not before having his pants fall down and all present having a good laugh at him. The duel in question was instigated a few days before, when Dumas was having dinner at the Palais Royal with a group of his friends. After eating, they decided to head out to smoke and play billiards at a local cafe. While at the cafe, the soldier made a joke about Dumas' cloak and boots. Like any good Frenchman of the day, Dumas didn't take this slight on his honor lightly, and a duel was set for a few days later, much to the chagrin of Dumas' friends, who did not fancy him going up against a trained soldier. Dumas proceeded to practice shooting with his seconds and proved a good shot, but this turned out for naught, and it was decided that the duel would be fought with swords. Luckily, Dumas was a decent enough fencer, though his confidence in the arena was much less than with a gun. At the appointed time, Dumas showed up for the duel armed with his father's sword, but his rival was nowhere to be found. After further investigation, it was discovered that his opponent had slept through the time of the duel, so it was rescheduled for the following day at a quarry near Montmartre in Paris. On the day of the duel, it was extremely cold and there was significant snow on the ground. Once a suitable location within the quarry was chosen, Dumas' opponent asked that Dumas take off not only his jacket, but also his vest and shirt. While doing this, Dumas also removed his suspenders, at which point his pants fell down due to his belt buckle being broken. The crowd of quarry workers that had gathered had a good laugh at Dumas' expense over this, but this time he was at least sensible enough to not challenge them all to duels. Rather, he simply tied up his pants with his suspenders and the two opponents fought. Once the duel began, Dumas immediately managed to strike the man's shoulder, at which point the man tripped on a root and fell after jumping back in surprise and shock at how cold the blade was, having just been laying in the snow while Dumas was undressing. Now on the ground, rather than continue the duel, the soldier yielded and the duel was over without anyone being killed or seriously injured. This is lucky for us, as The Count of Monte Cristo is arguably one of the greatest works of fiction of all time, and it would have been a shame for Dumas to die at the young age of 23 and not have a chance to write it, along with some aid of ghostwriter Auguste Marquet some 19 years later.